Hello, everybody. Make sure I'm coming through. Yep, we're coming through. Very good. So this is a little bit of a milestone stream, I think. I think this is the first non-gaming related, at least, stream that we've done. Actually, on the Day Zero channel, I think it is the first weekend stream we've ever done. So, hey, hitting new targets. We are at a more reasonable time than last time, for those who weren't around, and it would be totally understandable for those in in Eastern time zones and time zones that are close to that. We did a stream on Thursday, well, technically Friday morning, I guess. We did a stream at like 2 a.m. in the morning Eastern. It was really, really late. We had an Australian special. We had a lot of people from other parts of the world where it was like in the day for them, and it was kind of neat. But yeah, for anybody who missed that, the VOD is up. But basically, I was going through what I thought of for a new strategy with a race, which I will quickly recap in the stream as well. Teamstar managed to jump on for a few minutes of that stream as well. Actually, for more than a few minutes. I went for, I think, maybe like an hour and a half, maybe. And I was going to cut it off there, but then Teamstar jumped on and we went on for another hour and 15 minutes. So, yeah. I managed to talk over with Teamstar, try to, reconfirm that my strategy makes sense and wasn't some crackpot thing that wasn't going to work. And it did make sense, I believe. And I've started implementing it. I'm not all the way there yet. This is kind of a middle stream, I guess, between thinking up the strategy and hopefully finishing off that strategy. Now, obviously, a bit of the elephant in the room is that Flo released his exploit implementation. He put that out on Twitter. There's people already running payloads on 7.51, and I think they're trying to get things fixed for 7.55. There's kind of an interesting situation there, actually. It seems they made, like, the exploit works on 7.55, but there's some weird shit that Sony did where payloads don't work anymore. They probably modified the kernel and more patches are required or something. I don't know. I don't have any systems on those firmwares, so I haven't tried it myself, and I don't know if I will, or if I do it won't be for a little while anyway. Continue your strategy or what? Yeah, I'm going to be continuing on my strategy. I'll talk about that in a sec. Will this be on YouTube? We are planning on putting the VODs on YouTube at some point. I don't know how exactly we want to do it yet, though, because at this point we do have like many hours of streams to the point where, like, I don't know if we'd want to flood the YouTube with like 10 videos, but at the same time, if we make a collage, then it's going to be like a stupid, like, it's going to be like 40 hours long, maybe, something. I don't know. Because we were messing with on the PS4 for a long while in our first few streams, so. Yeah, I don't know how exactly we're going to do that, but we do plan to have some form of being able to watch the streams after, because on Twitch, we don't control when they get removed, but usually a couple months in, or even a few weeks after, the VODs disappear off Twitch, so. We'll rehost them somewhere. It's probably at the end, like when everything is finished. I just don't know exactly how we'll do that yet. Ignoring the last stream and this one, it's been 36 and a half hours of video. Yeah, it's been a while. 14 days, 30 or 60 if you're a sub. Yeah, but that's not totally consistent either, because I remember there were some of our VODs that stayed up for like 4 months or something. I don't think that's like a hard cutoff date. I don't know what like goes into when they get removed. No, they stayed up for us. Oh, okay, so other people couldn't see them? Is that what it was? Public access was still removed. Okay, alright. So I was playing myself, I guess. Alright, so yeah, there were some people that were tweeting at me saying, are you still going to continue with your strategy? Are you still going to do the streams? I mean, yes. I even said on, I think, the last stream, and probably the one before that too, that Sleersgovy was likely going to finish before I was, because he's had his strategy working for a little while now. All he had to work on doing was getting it ported to the PS4 and tweaking whatever needed to be tweaked, right? We're trying to go from, like, like implement a new strategy, right? So that's going to take longer. I didn't really ramp up into doing like putting a lot of time into the exploit dev until this week. So I'm still a little bit early on in the exploit process for what I typically do. TD Maniac, thank you for the sub. Coming in for 2 months. Thank you, dude. Welcome back. So yeah, we're gonna be continuing the streams. I'm doing these because I like doing the like I find exploitation fun, kernel exploitation fun, and I wanted to try doing my own strategy. And we're doing the streams because we thought it'd be cool for people to get some insights into that process, right? So that hasn't changed with SlearsGovey releasing a POC or an exploit rather. I will say it will be interesting to compare afterwards what the stability is like between assuming my strategy goes all the way to a full chain exploit, which I think it will, but we'll see. It would be interesting to compare the stability between the two methods. Our methods are kind of similar in that we end up targeting the same type of object, but the way we go there is a bit different. He gets an overlap on a header and makes the header do a 1-byte smash into the file pointers. I'm intending to do a race so that I can fake the entire buffer of file pointers, which I think will be cool when we can get it to work. But yeah, it'll be interesting to compare stability. In a way, his could end up being more stable, but mine also could end up being more stable. It's hard to tell at this point with the amount of moving parts involved. How are you doing? We're doing well. Where's team? It's way too late / early for him. It's like 5 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning his time. So yeah, he's not here. He might be waking up soon. I think it's a little while. I think he usually wakes up around closer to like 10 or whatever his time, because that's when he woke up. He came on our stream, on our morning stream, at around 10:30, I think his time. So, or somewhere around there. Where is Spectre developed? Nobody knows. All right, so I will quickly go over what the strategy that I'm going with is, because there's probably people who missed the stream I did a couple days ago. Basically, I did some Google Slides going through what SlearsGovey does and what I'm planning to do. So here's the basis for my strategy. It's not the exact strategy because there's a problem with it, but we'll go through that now. I'll kind of reiterate over this. If you saw the previous stream where I went over this, apologies. I won't go as in depth. I guess I'll kind of just skim through it. All right. So yeah, we start off with, as we always do, with 2 UDP sockets pointing to the same mbuff. Teamstar actually criticized my slides last stream. He said they're a little bit confusing because I have 2 boxes here on the right, but really it should only be 1 box because it's pointing to the same thing. But this was just the way I envisioned it in my head. If I do like a proper video or something using these slides later on, I'll fix them up and make them better. But basically, we have 2 UDP sockets. They point to the same mbuff, and the sockets in question are on the left, and the mbuff is on the right. Now, there are multiple boxes on the right, but those all effectively point to the same thing, so just keep that in mind. So, we receive on 1 overlap socket in order to free up the mbuff to get it reclaimed. We then spray in... Actually, this part I ignored, so forget this part. So yeah, we free up on one of the pairs to get it floating. We spray in a stack of file pointers so that that gets put in by the mbuff. And then we have the TCP socket pair, which points into that mbuff, which should. That is supposed to be its memory. It allocated it. But we also have one of these pairs that points to the same mbuff, so we still have the ability to free it from underneath the TCP socket pair. So we have a controlled UAF that we can fire off at any time that we want. So we receive on the other pair to make that happen. We force the UAF. We then spray our own fake file pointers inside of there, or evil file pointers that we control and we can get code execution from by faking the function pointer table, we receive on the corrupt TCP pair that we overlapped or caused a UAF on, and we win, essentially. Now, this in itself is not possible, and that's because inside of the mbuff in the header, it keeps track of the type of the mbuff, and the mbuff that it gets allocated to store all these file pointers, it has a special flag set. It's set to a control buffer, MT control. If you cause a UAF and you overlap, you will lose that type identifier. So when it goes to use, like when you try to force it to use that file pointer that you set up, it won't follow the path because that flag isn't set anymore, right? And this is something we kind of discovered early on with some of the other strategies we were looking at with TeamStar on like day like the 3rd or 4th stream, I think. But there's a way we can get around this, and that's by using racing. So the bug in itself inherently doesn't involve race conditions. There's no like racing to it, outside of the fact that you have to be fast to get your allocations, but that's not really a race. But what happens if we introduce a race aspect to it? So what happens if we run it on 2 threads? We have one thread that starts a read FD on the files to get that file pointer used on the corrupt socket pair, and then on the second thread, we cause that UAF. Well then, now we can control the time of the UAF more specifically. So we can make that UAF happen after that control flag is set, but before the file pointers are actually used. So we can kind of substitute it in right in between, and that should allow our strategy to work out and revive the strategy I just covered. The other thing to note is usually when you're talking about races and race conditions, locking and mutexes are important to look at. In this case, because we're racing with a UAF that we already have, we're not racing to cause a UAF, locks do not even matter to us. They have 0 impact. You could have 1 million locks, which would be very unperformant, but you could have 1 million locks and it still wouldn't impact. Well, I guess it would change the race window, but anyway, just in the fact of executing the lock instructions itself, it would actually expand your race window. Locking would help you in a way. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, we're just gonna pretend that locks don't exist because they're kind of irrelevant to the actual strategy. So yeah, basically the same idea. Thread 1 starts reading on the stack of file pointers, and then when that happens, we free on thread 2. And then our evil file pointer gets used and we win. So, the strategy before the racing is what I was working on yesterday, basically, and a little bit of today. So yeah, I've started the implementation work on that. This is my file. Yesterday was a very frustrating day. I had a really silly bug that got in my way that cost me a lot of time. I put probably like 10 or 11 hours into this shit yesterday. Yeah, I'll maybe talk about that in a second because it was fun. But you can tell like my frustrations because as you scroll down in the code, there's just more and more like curse words being thrown around. But you know, whatever. This is just like really messy right now, the way the code is written. I'll clean it up, probably off stream or something, because it doesn't really matter how pretty the code is at the moment. Because I'm doing a lot of movement on the code. I'm removing a lot of shit, adding a lot of shit, changing a lot of stuff. So there's not really a point in keeping it really pretty right now because it's probably not going to stay there anyway. Isn't race condition the hardest exploit to pull off? I mean, race conditions are interesting. They can be. You can get some really tight races that really suck to exploit or are flat out unexploitable because of the scenario. But there's some times where a race condition can be super useful, and they are really cool bugs. They're probably my favorite bug class, to be honest, just because of how interesting they are and how easy they are to make from a developer standpoint. You know, writing multi-threaded, like parallel programming is very difficult, so it's easy to mess up. But yeah, I mean, the thing with race conditions is it's typically more dependent on the system state than some of the other types of bugs, right? When you're working with like a heap overflow or something, you're dependent on the heap state. When you're talking about a race condition, you could be dependent on the heap state as well as the state of the scheduler, the hardware involved, like what the CPU, like how performant the CPU is. You've got a lot of different things that go into that. I mean, there's kind of a fun story around that, to be honest. I remember an iOS exploit from, I think it was 2 years ago, that was a race condition, and it was really hard to hit. And when I mean really hard to hit, I mean it would work like 1 in 100 times. So people would literally take their phone and they would stick it in a freezer to jailbreak, because by messing with the temperature of the CPU, they can make it execute slower. It was really insane. But that's races, right? It's just dependent on more resources generally. I love timing attacks for the same reason. Yeah, timing side channels and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, they're similarly cool. It's why I like hardware attacks too. Unfortunately, I'm not really experienced in hardware attacks. I don't know if I've ever pulled off tried to pull off a hardware attack, not even a toy one. But I think they're really cool, right? And it's for a similar reason to that. And people thinking Z is Flats. I don't know. Flats is in the similar situation as Teamstar. I don't know if he's even awake right now. I don't know. It's probably a little late for him. You can use that to manipulate frames and catch shiny Pokemon. Basically like that RGH exploit on the 360. I feel like I vaguely remember what that was about. I wasn't really into I never even owned an Xbox 360, but I do. It does kind of ring a bell, that exploit. All right. So yeah, basically what I have going on here, scrolling up the code a bit. So yeah, initial stuff is just set up. This is mostly just so that I have it done and out of the way. That way it doesn't cause interference on later stages of the exploit, which are more time sensitive. We build up the double free packet. We trigger the double free. And just like what we were doing on those streams with Teamstar, we spray a bunch of tagged UDP packets in order to identify which sockets have an overlapped mbuff. When we, after we finish spraying, we loop through it and we peek on each mbuff to figure out which one has what we want. Now, this is kind of important that we just peek here and not pop. Because we want to be able to control when we free that pointer, right? That's what gives us the control of UAF. This is one thing that I need to check on PS4. I have to imagine that this works on PS4, and I was just messing up, because some of you might remember from one of the earlier streams, I tried doing resv from syscall on PS4, and it didn't work. I was having really strange behavior, but I must have been screwing it up, because Slear's Govi's exploit works and he peaks, so yeah, I might have just been off my rocker that day and didn't really I had a bug and just didn't see it, possibly. What is going on with current Slear's exploit? What it is failing? His exploit works. It's just 7.55 has some internal changes that probably require more patches to be ran in order to run payloads. As far as I know, the exploit is fine on 7.55. It's the payloads that don't work, and it's probably because Sony added some code that needs to be patched for it to work. Because Sony's been doing a lot of messing around since 5.05, adding in more code, trying to make it more difficult to work with from an exploitation standpoint and from a post-exploitation standpoint. So it's possible they just added a new check that you have to reverse a little bit for and find a patch. It'll probably be fine within like a week or something. Yeah, so Getting back to the exploit or the implementation, we have that overlap. Once we do, we pop out, or we cause a free on the first overlap to cause the mbuff to be put back into the free list so it can be reclaimed. We do a spray of those file pointers by doing right FD on the socket pairs. And what the intent of that is to get the socket pair, or the file pointers on that socket pair put into the same mbuff that we already have a reference to on the other socket. That way we can free it later. And then after that, we pop the same mbuff again to cause the UAF. And then we push some UDP packets in. I push a UDP packet full of just hex 4.1s, just because, that's to please the exploit gods, you have to do 4.1s to demonstrate corruption, right? So I push in a bunch of hex 4.1s, and then we read on all the file descriptors afterwards, and we expect one of these socket pairs to, instead of having the stack of file pointers that we're used to seeing in that area, we see the 4.1s, and that's what demonstrates that you have corruption. Hex 51 master race. I mean, I guess I've used all manner. I've used hex 41. I haven't really used hex 50. I've used hex 60. I've used hex 1337. I've got like 3 or 4 different constants that I use for like exploit stuff. But I always make RIP point to hex 41, 41, 41, 41 before exploiting anything. Once I get code execution, it's like your prayer almost, I guess, doing it that way. So I'm going to go ahead and run this implementation on the BSD VM that I had set up to show you guys what happens. I've written some Python scripts to take care of some of the SSH stuff under the hood to be able to upload the exploit file and run it and get the log information. Mostly just because I was tired of running the SSH commands manually and entering the password and everything every time, and I don't have the tools on BSD to generate a key pair for SSH because BSD 9 is a pain in the ass and none of the repos are up anymore for all those utilities. Thank you for the 100 bits, RV Tech CR. Appreciate it. From what I see, it's a Prison 0 issue or something because we can get FTP payload at least connecting if we don't include the kernel payload. I also saw a tweet about an issue with him forking from WebKit. Forking from what? For the payload loader? For the payload loader, it should be fine. You don't want to fork a persistent process. I was getting a bit of a tongue twister there. Persistent process. You don't want to fork that from WebKit because it's so heavy. You're gonna eat gigabytes of memory. So for the payload loader, it should be fine though. But it's possible Sony did something with process launching to try to mess with that too. Definitely wouldn't surprise me. All right, you're linking me a tweet. Let's see what it's about. All right, we're going down the rabbit hole a little bit. Remove line 525 and jb.c and recompile to fix the crash when forking WebKit. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, fine. I think I have his exploit downloaded, so I'll get that really quick. Where did I put that? We'll take a quick look because I'm curious. Was it 525? He said. Wait, what? That shouldn't be a problem. This isn't. Oh, this isn't doing something with Prison 0. This should be doing something with Let me try to think this through. Yeah, this is doing something with the file descriptor table of the process. Yeah, this is something else. I don't know why this would break things. Because I would think... Yeah, essentially what this is doing is, I think it's zeroing out the sockets. That way you don't have to deal with the corrupted socket and the panic afterwards. But I guess if he says to comment it out, then I don't know. That's strange. I don't know enough about, uh, well, I just don't have the offsets of exactly what's happening here. The way he writes code is a little bit frustrating. Instead of doing like a proper structure to show what's going on, he just does these like triple pointers and shit. It's it's really hard to read. You have to basically like figure out what he's accessing there, which I don't have off the top of my head. I would have to look into it more. I don't want to veer off track too much, but yeah, I mean, I imagine that stuff would be resolved. I would think. Why are you not a follower on Slearsgovy's Twitter? Oh, am I not following him? I don't know. It's not because I it's not because I don't like him or something. I don't really follow people on Twitter all that often. I usually follow people in bursts. Like I'll be like, oh, okay, here's some people that I haven't followed. I'm surprised I'm not following them, and I'll just go and do it in like a few minute window. If I'm not, I'll follow him in a sec. If I'm not actually following him, I thought I was. His Twitter account was also restricted at one point. It's possible I was following him, and then Twitter does their stupid shit where it's like if they restrict your account, you lose your followers, right? So that's probably what happened actually. Now that I think about it, could have been something like that. What's with the int star 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 star? Yeah, that's not my code. That's Lears Govy's code. The same as these nano sleeps. I didn't write this. This is really cursed right here. So for those not familiar with the nano sleep function, it takes a structure, right? It takes a time spec, right? TV sec and TV nsec. Instead of setting up a structure and passing it to it, he just creates a structure out of a string. It is some of the most cursed code I've ever seen. It works, but it is so like confusing to read. But that's just the way he codes. And like exploit code is always gonna be pretty uh you know messed up. It's not gonna be super clean. All right. So yeah, going back to the exploit and the implementation, I'm gonna run it on the BSD VM. Like I said, I wrote these little scripts to handle it for me. Just if you're wondering why I'm running Python 3. So let's go ahead and get a log up, and we will upload the exploit and run it. The output on the exploit doesn't come through until the end. I don't know why. I am buffering on the new lines, and it should be coming through, but it's not, and I don't care enough to go through and find out why. So we'll have to wait a bit for the like STD out of the exploit program. There we go. All right. So we'll search through our log and see if we can identify patterns that we want. The other thing is there is some information that we're not getting in the log, and that's because FreeBSD rebooted because it panicked. And that's expected. I expect it to panic the way it does. It just means before I can evaluate the full log, I have to go back in and get it from the crash dump. So I'll do that quickly now. I do have to use SSH for that actually though. So let's get in there. Oh, it's not done rebooting yet. Let's pull it up. VM core.110. So I've panicked this VM at least 110 times. More than that actually, because the file system got corrupted on one of them and it rolled back. So I probably got around 200 panics on this VM by now. It's like a fun fact. But it's fine because it's way better than the PS4. It can reboot in 30 seconds instead of 30 minutes. So it's a lot more pleasant to deal with. Hey guys, first time I've got the stream. Just want to say thank you for all your hard work. Ever since my PSN account was banned for no reason, I've been following the scene progress pretty actively. What, you figured banned on PlayStation, so I might as well like jailbreak and stuff, since you can't use it for online play anymore? That's fair enough, if that's the case. Spectre, Team Chrome, or Firefox, and why? I don't actually fall on a team for that. I use both. I use Chrome for the streams, and I use Firefox as my daily driver, which isn't consistent either. I've switched that up too. I've switched between Firefox and Chrome and whatnot, and Edge, so Chrome basically. It's just, it depends. Like usually I'll run it for a few months and then I'll change it up. I don't even know why. I just, it's that new thing effect, I guess. I get bored with a browser, so I switch to a new one. All right. So let's get that log. So cat var crash. This is VM core.1, or sorry, not VM core. Core.text.110. We're gonna pipe that through less. All right. So this is the unread kernel log buffer. So we'll get all of that and then we'll quit out and we'll copy it all to the text editor so we can go through it and not deal with the terminal. Wow, we have a lot of unread messages. It must have been late in the corruption. Wow, I think this is the farthest I've ever seen it. Okay, there we go. Man, that took a long time for that to trigger. All right, so let's get the output. For those wondering why I'm using the context menu, it's because WSL is really annoying when it comes to copy and pasting, and my mouse is a little bit broken. So sometimes when I right-click, it actually double right-clicks. And if I select in the terminal and right-click to copy, sometimes it'll try to paste it again, and it'll break the terminal. It's really not fun. So now I just use the context menu. No team start this party? No. He'll probably be... We'll do another sync-up stream with him. We talked about it. We are going to do another sync-up one. I don't know when, because we're not scheduling the streams anymore, but we'll get him on again, no worries. But some of them I will be doing solo, yeah. All right, so here we are with our kernel log. So I modified the kernel for those who didn't catch the last stream. I talked about that there as well. Basically, part of the reason I'm using a BSD VM is the fact that I can edit, like hack in the kernel source, rebuild it, install that kernel, and run the exploit against it to get some debugging information going on. Whereas with the PS4, I can't do that. I obviously can't build a kernel from source because I don't have the kernel source, and even if I did, I couldn't flash it onto the system. So, I mean, you could do hooking and patching on the PS4, but it's a lot shittier than what I'm doing here. So I edited a few source files that are relevant for the exploit. One of them being frag6 to tell me... Well, this was actually mostly for Slearscovy's strategy. This isn't really important for me. But yeah, like, I modified the syscall file so that I can get exactly when that SO receive generic... Or sorry, that's in socket. When SO receive generic is called, so I know that I have corruption on that stack of file pointers. I also have some mbuff modifications, so I know when my clusters fire off and what pointers those occupy. And I have some prints in the UNP internalize and externalize functions, which are relevant for those file pointers, basically. So yeah, that's what all the crap is in the kernel log. These are all like the stuff I've put in there. That's not in the stock kernel. So here, this is the initial UDP spray to find the overlap and all the mbuffs that are associated with that. In this little area, in this spray, what we're hoping for is 2 mbuffs or M equals. We're hoping for 2 of those in here to be the same, because that means we have the overlap, right? And that did happen. I know because of the way the exploit behaved. So right here, about a third, maybe. No, probably like a quarter of the way into the spray. You can see we have cluster M equals AA0500, and then the next one is also AA0500. So we have an overlap here. So if we keep that pointer in mind and we follow it down, we find a UNP internalize that uses that exact same pointer, which is good. It now means one of that stack of file pointers is going to be overlapping with the other cluster M that we had earlier. So the next thing we do is search it again. We should see it being allocated with that cluster print again because we pop it out on the second overlap socket so that we can corrupt it. So this is where that's happening. And then we should find it used one more time in the so receive generic or socket receive generic. And you can see, like the previous ones, all of them point to the stack of file pointers and the data is intact. This is a pointer right here. This is a pointer. This is a pointer. In FreeBSD, like a heap pointer is always going to start with FF. So that's how you can tell that they're actually heap pointers. But on this very last one, before we panic, you can see we have the 4-1. So we know we got corruption. So this is good. This basically tells me that my strategy will, like, the basis of the memory part of the strategy works out and makes sense. Now it's just a matter of moving that into a threaded context so that we can, instead of having this panic, we can actually make it work and get code execution. This step could be a little bit tricky. At a, I guess, high level, it's pretty trivial. You're essentially moving it into another thread. But there's a lot of trial and error involved because you have to get the timing down. You have to know when to free and spray in that packet in order for it to go into that window that I talked about earlier. So I'll get into that a little bit in a second too, because I kind of wanted to do that last stream, but we ran way too late. We went to like 5 a.m. In this one, I will talk about the race window more in depth and kind of demonstrate exactly what that race window is. Seeing some people in chat are wondering about the mystery of Z. Is Spectre the owner of this channel? If yes, who is you? Yeah, Z is a robot. In all honesty, like part of the reason that I wasn't streaming as much in the weeks before last week was because I was actually working on tweaking the artificial intelligence that Z runs on. So that's the reason, you know? Yeah, no, in seriousness, Z, like he said, he's on for the podcast. We jointly own the channel. Like, not one of us owns it or something. We both own it. We run weekly podcasts on Monday. And we also do these other streams whenever we feel like it. So far, I've been the only one that's been doing the non-podcast streams. I think Z hopes to at some point, but probably not until a little later down the line, and we have some things worked out. But hopefully we'll be able to see some Z streams at some point, you know? And I'll be the one moderating the chat. We'll kind of flip the roles around. What's news today? Any gift? I mean, if you mean a gift in general, then yeah, Slater's Govey dropped an exploit. PS4 implementation. But that's not a gift from me, obviously. I actually had somebody DM me today thanking me for dropping the PS4 exploit, and I'm like, yeah, that's not me, dude. Slater's Govey and like, I'm not the same person as Slater's Govey. That was him. So Slears did a good job. Yeah, he's a smart dude, man. It's good that we have another one of us, another exploit dev, I guess, in the PS4 scene. It's cool because for a long while there, like, it was only a few people who really did exploitation stuff on PS4. There was well, C-Turt was in there initially, but he left. He's doing his own stuff now. There was Flats. There was me, Kiwi, and like a few other people, but like it was kind of limited. Like other console scenes had a lot more like interest on the developer side, so it's always nice to see new people, like new life, come into the PS4 scene rather, because we need it. The PS4 scene when it comes to homebrew and stuff is severely lacking, and it's because of the lack of dev power. So more devs we have coming in, the greater. And that's another thing I want to point out, actually. Is Slater's Govey doesn't just do exploit stuff. He's actually helped a lot with the toolchain, too. Like, there's quite a few issues and bugs that he's reported that we've worked through. Yeah, so he's helped fix a few things. I don't know why GitHub search isn't bringing them up, but like here's another one from him. He's been helping a lot with the tool chain too. It's been awesome. Um, are you interested in the PC scene cracking and things like that? I don't care about cracking or piracy or anything. It's never really been that interesting to me. There is some interesting research, I guess, behind the like DRM. You know, when you talk about de novo and breaking that and stuff like that, and the packing and protectors, like that is interesting, but it's just not something that I've really bothered with because as an end goal, I don't really care about piracy. All right. So, yeah, so this is the behavior that we wanted to see in memory, right? We got those 4 ones in there. Now we just need to move that into another thread so that the flag gets evaluated and it passes before we corrupt it. So I said I would go more in depth on the race window, so I'm going to do that now. Partially so that you guys can see what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a race, but also because I actually need to get the specifics jotted down for myself because I don't have them narrowed down exactly. Just only at like a higher level. So we'll go to SO receive generic. That's where everything starts on the receive end. 1454. Let's turn on dark mode so it's not as ugly. Hey man, can you say my name? Crystal Castles. Where's Chendo Chap, the dev? There is no sound of him. He's around. Um, he's around in like the Open Orbis Discord and whatnot. I don't think he's really doing much with PS4 at the moment. I mean, you got to remember, like a lot of people that work on PS4 stuff, they also have other stuff that they work on, like professional work and stuff. And obviously, when they're doing PS4 stuff, it's not like they're getting paid for it. So you can only do PS4 stuff when life permits, right? And for some people, it's more like you can dedicate more time into it, and for other people, less, right? So I think he's been busy with his own stuff. I don't think he's really doing much with PS4 at the moment. I actually haven't been doing much with PS4 over the last like couple months, except for when we started up these streams again, and mostly like in the last week. Like even when we were doing the streams, I only did PS4 stuff when we were streaming once a week. Um, it's only like the last week or so where we've been doing like where I've put more time into it, where I've been doing PS4 stuff on a consistent basis. Before that, I was kind of on a hiatus doing other stuff. So at this point, just get a PS5 instead of a PS4 Pro. I mean, it depends. If you're talking about just playing games, then yeah, a PS5 probably makes more sense. If you care about exploitation, though, PS4 Pro might be better because who knows when a public PS5 thing goes out. Never know. PS5 is going to be tougher to do a jailbreak for. I'll tell you that much. It's going to be a lot more work, and because of that, it's possible there's not something seen for a while. So, just throwing that out there. So everything starts at socket receive generic. So let's get this function into Sublime Text so I can mark it up. Oh man, this function's big. I forgot how big this function is. Okay, let's get rid of all the line numbers because I do not care about the line numbers. This is going to take a little bit because there's so many. Fuji Mod's already got fake packages on PS5. I don't know about that. I'd never heard of that person, which is generally kind of a red flag. It's not hard to make doctored videos of that kind of stuff. Anybody with a pirated copy of like After Effects can do it pretty easily if they care enough. Don't forget we jump ahead 1 hour soon. Um yeah, actually, I don't know when that happens exactly. I never keep track of the spring forward. When is that? That's something. It's good that you brought up because I do want to know that for like the podcast and shit. Whoa! Wait, today? Oh shit! I didn't know it was that close. I thought it was weeks out. Oh man, so I'm gonna lose an hour this weekend? Oh, my weekend was already kind of crammed, man. Oh shit. Okay, that sucks. Yeah, it always fires off at 2 a.m. Oh, that's so annoying. That's a bit depressing. On one hand, I want to say damn you for bringing that up, but on the other hand, I want to thank you for bringing that up because that would have thrown me for a loop tomorrow, probably. I'm not losing any time. Yeah, look at Z over here flexing in his non-daylight savings time. So mean. I wish we didn't have DST, but we do. Okay, so this is the SO receive generic function. After this is the next level, which is the UNP externalized function, which is called through function pointer. So let's get that. What we're looking for is UNP externalize 1674. This one's much more reasonable in size. DST is so dumb, more harm than good. Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why we still have daylight savings time. There was actually a big push where I live in the province of Ontario. There was a big push to get rid of daylight savings time last year. But they would only do it if New York and Quebec also got on board. And it was pretty much dead out the gate because even if New York decided to not do daylight savings time anymore, which would be pretty much impossible, you'd have to get Quebec to do it too, which is even more impossible because Quebec would not change just to spite Ontario. Ontario wants it? Okay, we're not going to do it. Quebec and Ontario don't like each other very much. New York won't do it. Yeah, exactly. Like that was such a stupid proposal last year, getting people's hopes up that DST was going to die. It was never going to happen as soon as they announced those terms. Magic Trick coming in with a 6-month sub. Thank you, dude. Welcome in. -1 at 2 a.m. Yep, we'll keep an eye on that. I don't know if that'll happen on the stream. Maybe it will. I don't know if we'll go that long. And actually, I don't think we'll go that long because I don't want to go to. The goal with these like more spaced out or less spaced out rather, these more like frequent impromptu streams is that they're more frequent, but they're also not as long. So, Magic Trick again gifting in 5 subs. Welcome in everyone who got gifted in. Thank you, dude. We got a lot of action going on today. Thank you, Magic Trick. I'm poor. I wish I could subscribe. Yeah, don't worry about it, dude. Only sub or gift subs or whatever if you can, and you want to. Definitely don't feel forced to. It's not like I don't run ads on this channel, so I don't think you if you get ads, it's just Twitch putting them on. I think they might put an ad on when you first visit the stream, maybe, but yeah, I don't run advertisements, so you don't need to worry about like the sub for getting around that. Magic Trick giving in another gifted sub. Thank you. Welcome in, Umarda Best 559. Force pre-roll ads. Yeah, so Twitch runs some ads, but we don't. So if you don't have a sub, hopefully you should only get that initial ad, which we can't control, unfortunately. Because that is like the big thing with subs, right? Is you don't get the ads, but yeah, we don't run ads, so only donate if you're if you're willing and able. You also get the emotes. Okay, I did forget about the emotes. That's a good point. If you want the day 0 explosion and the no CVE and the beep emote, that comes with the sub too. Yeah. Did you set up the 0 day fans yet? I think Z's actually been working on that. He's been doing a little bit on that front. For those who are kind of out of the loop on that, in the Day Zero Discord, we were joking a little bit about like a OnlyFans parody, but for exploits. So Z's been working on that, and when it's finished, it'll be funny, a funny parody to have out there. Because I don't even know how it started, but there's been jokes around like a Day Zero OnlyFans for quite a while now. I don't even remember when it started. It's been a while. All right, so these are the two relevant functions. So, this is where the file pointers get used. Let me turn on highlighting because this is really ugly at the moment. So this is where the file pointers get used. It reads them in from the buffer and it stores them in the process's FD table. So we'll put a comment for the target there. Let's make that a little bit. That's not how far back I want to go. I'm gonna make it like a little bit big. That way I can see it on this little scroll thing on the right here, which is partially covered by the chat. Kickstarter for console exploits. So this is our target, and the check I was talking about that we absolutely positively need to pass is here. Right? So you can see here, they read the mbuff, they check the type, and they will only follow this path that calls the externalize function pointer. And actually, I should denote that too. I don't know why there's space here. So yeah, so we need to get past this point so that the control check passes, and then anywhere along here that we could UAF and get our control data in should be fine. I think this is fair game in terms of the window. And then inside of the externalize function should also be fair game for when thread 2 causes that corruption. So there's one thing that's kind of important, I think, that I did actually manage to solve like right before I went live on the stream today. But it was a bit of a concern for mine, and I came up with a clever strategy around it. So let me talk about that now. So let's bring up our exploit run again. So actually, let me go back to where I had the kernel log first. So remember, we have this mbuff which gets shared, right? And the goal is to get the mbuff used by that UNP internalize function for the file pointers, as well as keep that pointer in one of the UDP socket pairs. The problem is, you can see in this stack of UNP internalize calls, the pointer that is of interest to us that we have control over, it's not the first one. It's not the second one. It's not the third one. It's like in the middle of the stack. And this is pretty common. And I'm not totally sure why, if I'm being honest with you. Generally speaking, when you're talking about a kernel free list or the FreeBSD free list, it's a linked list, right? And when you add something to the free list, when something goes to allocate, it's going to pull from the top of the free list, right? So in theory, if you free something and then you allocate immediately after that, the pointer that you freed should be the same pointer that gets allocated next, right? That's because of how the free list works. That's not always the case. There are hardened free lists. Thank you for the Twitch Prime, Stace505, welcome in. So yeah, that's not always the case because you can have hardened free lists. But in kernel, because you want to keep things quick, you want to keep them efficient, you don't want to be doing any additional checks, that's generally how it works, right? Now, I don't know exactly why this function doesn't, or this pointer doesn't get allocated until the middle of the stack of that file descriptor spray. Generally, like I said, I would expect the first one, like immediately after I free it, the next pointer allocation should be that pointer. But in this case, what I'm guessing is happening is there's other stuff running in the background which is allocating and freeing So it's putting pointers into the free list after my my pop mbuff does it. So those things have to be, or those pointers have to be grabbed off the free list before it'll use mine. And generally that's like 120. How many lines is this? Yeah, it's 76. So there's 76 things on the free list that have to be cleared before it reaches my UAF target, which is a bit annoying because we have to know which one, like which stack of file descriptors, we have an overlap with, because we want to be precise when we trigger the race. We want to trigger the race specifically at a point in time when the routine is being ran for parsing the file pointers inside of that stack of file descriptors. So we don't want to run it whenever, right? We want to run it precisely when we read this one here, right? And that could, like, I was thinking that would probably be an issue because you're not going to have the information from userland to tell you if you got an overlap, right? I know right now because I have kernel debug prints in there. In production, when we go to port this to the PS4, or even just running on a stock BSD kernel, we're not going to have that information. So we need to be able to know which iterator, like which stack of file pointers is the one we have the overlap with. Luckily, I did manage to solve this problem. Basically what I do is in the loop that I use to reclaim the freed memory with the stack of file pointers, I peek on the other mbuff that shares the same mbuff, I peek on the UDP socket that shares the same mbuff as those file pointers, and I basically peek it to make sure that it's not 0. Because if you peek it and we didn't get an overlap on that set of file descriptors, it's going to be whatever was in there before, which is just a bunch of zeros when you're reading it off the UDP socket. But if we manage to overwrite that mbuff with the stack of file pointers, now this peak is not going to be what we had for the, like, it's not going to be zeros. It's going to be changed, right? Because of the corruption that happens from the overlap. So we kind of have a side channel there in a way. And if I go into the run that I did, you can see, so this is the overlap stage. We have an overlap on pair 96, 97. And then I loop through the socket pairs, and you can see on 0, 2, 4, 6, the first socket in all the pairs here, they all peak 0. But then when we get to socket pair 152, we peak 58. And that's because we got the overlap with the stack of file pointers. I believe the 58 comes from the C message header that's involved with the SCM writes thing that we use to spray the file pointers. But yeah, so socket pair 152, that peak happens, which means that we should be able to, 153, I believe, should be the read that has the shared mbuff pointer. So let me just go back here for a second. Go back up. We got an mbuff. So this points into 614 right here. So let me just write that down really quick. 614. And then 613 to 538 is the other stacks of file pointers. So that is 76 lines, right? So if we take 76 and we multiply that by 2, because we're dealing with a socket pair, not a single socket, we have 152. And if we look at our run, 152 is where the peak changes from 0 to 58. So we have a side channel of exactly which socket pair we corrupt, even though we shouldn't be able to know that information. I think this was like a really cool stumbling that I did, and it kind of saved the strategy, because I was thinking, oh shit, I don't know if I can actually do this strategy because I won't know when to run the race, but the side channel saved us, so we're okay. So we know exactly which socket pair has the overlap on the mbuff, which means we can trigger the threads so that we receive that exact socket pair, and then on that receival is when we run the second thread to try to trigger the race condition. So this strategy is pretty sound, I think. We're pretty close to the end exploit. From here, it's just a matter of implementing the multi-threading and tweaking the timings to make the race work. Now, this is one thing that could be a pain point when we go to port to PS4, because those timings might have to change, right? This BSD VM, like, the CPU is going to be running quicker than the PS4 CPU, because, like I've said before, the PS4 CPU is garbage. But yeah, like, the timings are going to need adjustment to PS4, and I'm not going to have as much debugging capability, so that's going to be a bit tricky, but that's a bridge we'll cross when we come to it. First, I'm going to make it work on the BSD VM. Now, another thing I thought I would mention is I'm going to get this to the point of trying to get the exploit working on the VM, and that's probably going to be my goal for this weekend. Try to get that done the end of this weekend, which is a bit of a high goal because I have to look at the topics we have for the podcast on Monday too, so I'll be juggling a little bit there. But anyway, that's my goal for this weekend. Porting it to PS4, I'm probably going to use do it as a payload at first, because that'll be easier to tweak the timings on and mess around with, as opposed to using JS ROP chains like we were trying to do on the first couple streams. So I'm probably going to do it as a payload and then move it into a JS ROP chain. Basically, what Sleer's Govy does with his implementations, which it works, but I'm not really a fan of, is, like, you can see in his download, he has that jb.c file, right? What he does is he compiles this file and uses a ROP chain compiler to compile this into a ROP chain. So what you end up with is jb.s for the JavaScript, which is this shit. So he basically takes the C and compiles it into ROP chains, right? Which is perfectly valid. It's fair. The problem is WebKit can be really touchy after you've exploited it, depending on how the state is tainted by the exploit. By simply having too much data in the page, you can crash WebKit. It gets really stupid. It's really annoying. So when you're putting all of this code for a ROP chain, like, this is 224,000 lines of code. Like, it gets pretty easy to crash WebKit at that point. You're kind of pushing the limits. Whereas with a handcrafted JavaScript ROP chain, like what 5.05 was, for example, I think the WebKit side is a lot more stable. And remember, like, on 7.x firmwares, your WebKit exploit is not good. The WebKit exploit in and of itself is really difficult to run because, no offense to Synactive here, like, it's a cool, clever strategy, but we talked about it a little bit on the podcast. They use a clever trick to get around needing an info leak to exploit that WebKit bug. Typically, you would need an info leak to be able to set up a heap object to fake so that you don't crash. And the way Synactive got around that was they basically spray a ton of stuff on the heap and then guess at a pointer. They basically brute force the ASLR, which is cool because it eliminates your need for an info leak exploit, which is very valuable in WebKit, but it's also not stable. It's going to depend run to run, like where ASLR puts your process address space and all that shit. So that's why the WebKit exploit on 7.0x and higher is really unstable. So anything you can do to try to prevent that from being even worse than it already is a good idea, in my opinion. Like old school spraying for the NOP sled, yeah. So, yeah, I think by handcrafting it, that I'm gonna try to handcraft it if, my exploit works out. I'm gonna handcraft it because it in my experience it's worked out better. Um, but that's not to say like what Slirsgoby did is bad or anything. That is like compiling ROP chains from a C payload is more elegant probably because it's easier to edit, right? You edit the C code, you compile it, and it's just done. You don't need to do like modifications of the ROP chain, which can be really annoying and low level, but it's just with PS4 and the scenario there, it can cause issues sometimes. I saw your face. You are actually a bear. Yeah, that's a. I'm kind of jelly of Z's icon that he uses for like our podcasts and stuff because it is a really good icon, whereas mine is just a shitty S that I've had for like 3 years. But all right, so yeah, so once again, getting back to our window. I mean, our window is pretty large. Um, People who were on when Teamstar was on a couple days ago might remember. I said you can also extend this window. And what I meant by that is you see this for loop, right? So we want to target any of these file pointers that get written into the FD table. We don't have to corrupt all of them. We just have to corrupt one of them. So we can expand the race window in terms of timing by just making it so it uses a lot of FDs to make this loop run longer, and we can expand the window that way. And it's probably something I will do because with races, the more you can expand the window, the better, right? So this is kind of a godsend. The fact that we can control, like it's running in a loop. We control new FDs by the length that we pass in for the IOV, or sorry, for the C message data. So because we can control how many times this loop runs, we can extend the race window, and that will be a useful capability to be able to use. Yeah, so I'm going to be utilizing that to its extent, for sure. Well, looks like this we'll get this working over time. It smooths and less crashes. Yeah, so I was kind of saying earlier, once I don't know when exactly I'll get this ported to PS4 because some people might know, but or like might know or might not know, but I don't have a PS4 that's above 5.05. Or sorry, I might actually. I have a few PS4s. I have three. One of them I keep on latest firmware, so that one's already a no-go. One I have on 5.05 because that's just such a golden firmware. The other PS4 I think might be on 6.20 actually because I used it for my 6.20 WebKit exploit that I wrote like 2 years ago or whatever it was. So yeah, so I can update that one, I guess. I have to double check on that though. I haven't used that PS4 in a long time. But what I'd kind of like to do if I have it on that lower firmware is maybe try to work my way up if possible. Make the exploit work on 6.20, then move it up to whatever, and move it up to 7.50. That way there's the multi-firmware compatibility. I might do that, I might not. The other thing I want to do before I run any testing on higher firmwares than 5.05 is I want to abuse that glitch attack. Does anybody have the link for the PS4 glitch repo from Wildcard? I don't think his name is what, like, is it Wildcard? I don't remember. No, he doesn't. Man, I wish I had the link readily available so I could show you guys what I was talking about. What about the PS4 you played BO3 on? That's my latest system. Yeah, I can't remember what the people call it a downgrade attack. That's not quite accurate, but it should lead me to what I'm looking for. Yeah, I think this is it. Sysglitch. That's what it was called. I don't know why I couldn't remember what it was called. Right. So for those who don't know what I'm talking about, Wildcard came out with a glitch attack that you can launch from a Teensy, which is really crazy because Teensy is like really slow. People thought you would need an FPGA for something like this, but it works out on a Teensy apparently. But you can glitch Syscon on the PS4 in order to allow yourself to dump the like state for a firmware, and then later on when you update, usually you cannot revert back to a previous firmware, right? The PS4 doesn't use fuses, but it uses some other mechanisms so that, hey, you've updated, okay, that's your minimum firmware. If you flash a factory firmware lower than that, it's not going to work. But what Wildcard's attack allows you to do is it allows you to do a replay attack so that you can revert back to a firmware that you've already dumped. So people call this a downgrade attack, and that's not really accurate because typically a downgrade attack allows you to downgrade to any firmware, at least any firmware above what it came from factory. This attack allows you to replay if you've already done the work on the lower firmware in preparation. If you haven't done that, you're screwed. You're still not going to be able to go down in firmware. So I kind of want to run this attack on that PS4 so that I can switch firmwares whenever I want to, and I'm not locked into 7.5 or whatever. If I want to go back down to 6.20, I can. So yeah, I want to do that attack before I test on 7.5. And I need to get some equipment for that. I need to get the Teensy. I might need to get a few other tools for like the soldering work and whatnot. So bottom line, what I'm saying there is I'm not going to be able to test right away on 7.50 for a while, like probably a couple weeks. So if I get the PS4 implementation on 5.05 finished before then, I might get somebody on 7.5 to test for me or something. It's going to be a little bit interesting because I'm not going to be able to test myself. I don't want to, jump the gun and jump right to 7.5 and then screw my chance going back to any other firmware. So yeah, there will be a bit of a time delay on that. That said, I'm not super worried about it because Slursgovy already put out his exploit implementation, so that is out there that people can use. It's not like my exploit is going to be needed for a jailbreak on that firmware because it's already out there. So I'm not too worried about the timing of the release of my implementation, but it's just something I did want to put out there because it is going to take some time, probably. Centrino reverts his PS4s like daily. Yeah, I'm going to need to figure out all the details of what's involved with that attack because I don't know much about it. I know the basis of how it works at like the code level and what they glitch, but I don't know what the setup is very much beyond like this diagram, which is another thing actually. I don't even know if I have a 4K ohm resistor, so yeah, there's a few things I'll probably need to get before I can run this attack, and that's going to take some time. But yeah, just wanted to put that out there, put it on the record, so to speak, I guess. Do you only have one PS4? No, I do have three. I have one on latest firmware, one on 5.05, and one on 6.20, I think. Pretty sure it's on 6.20. All right, so yeah, that's what I'm going to be working on over the next day or so is making the race work. And I think I'll probably do another stream where I cover that a little bit more thoroughly. I don't know if it'll be tomorrow. It might be Monday. Like I said, with our podcast coming up, tomorrow's probably going to be tough. It's unlikely I stream tomorrow, but keep a lookout. It's possible. More likely, though, I'll probably stream on Monday after the podcast at night or something. Once again, I'll say the usual. Follow us on Twitter and check out our Discord for notifications for when we go live. You can also see in the user list on Discord because I turn on streamer mode, so it'll come up in my little card or whatever when I go live. So yeah, just follow those channels because, like I said, we're not doing the scheduling. I'm probably going to call it here for this stream, though. I know it was a little bit short, an hour and 20 minutes, but I mostly just wanted to go over some of the newer code that I've written and where I'm going from there and explaining some of the technical aspects of the race. Because from there, it's literally like, from here, it's going to be a lot of playing around and trial and error. It's probably just going to be hours of me running something, rebooting, trying the same thing with one value changed, rebooting, just doing that for hours. So yeah, that's where we moved from. Okay, that is good for bringing that up, because that is something I kind of asked and like in a Discord, and I didn't really get too many responses on it. I wanted to get the opinions of some of the people who are watching. What is the stability like for the current implementation? Because like I said, I don't have a system on 7.50, so I don't know. Like I've never ran it or tried it, so I'm curious what the stability is like on Slirsgovy's exploit. Al, as if this is suspicious situations, someone else has already freed the IDE. Please report this message to the kernel team. That quote sounds familiar, but what's the context around it? I need a bit of context. 8 to 10 hits and it works. Once I go hit settings, it kernel panics. So, okay, but here's the thing. Keep in mind that the jailbreak is two parts. It's the WebKit exploit and the kernel exploit. So, if you have to go into WebKit like 10 times or something to run it, that's because the WebKit exploit is unstable, and maybe, like I said, because there's so much, like 220,000 lines of code for the kernel exploit implementation by Slirsgovy, that might make WebKit more likely to crash. But I'm more interested in the kernel reliability, like of the kernel exploit itself. So like how often does it run compared to crash, like immediate full system crash, not just a browser crash? Because 8 to 10 hits and it works just means like that's WebKit being annoying, not the kernel, right? How often does the kernel crash from trying to run the exploit, I guess, is what I'm asking. LM says, I think they said 20%. Okay. I guess you must use proxy 9020 to inject payloads. Well, 9020 has been the payload port forever. I think we kind of set that standard with, like, what's it, 4.55 that we did that? But yeah, it's been 9020 for a long time. Mine crashed 6 times. Okay, how many times did you, like, are you saying you tried it 7 times and it crashed 6 times before it worked? Is that what you're saying? Because that would be interesting. That is a pretty low reliability. Yeah? Oh, okay. So it sounds like reliability might be a bit low between WebKit being unstable and kernel. That would about 8 kernel panics yesterday. Yeah, so I guess that kind of lines up with what LM said, right? With around 20%. So kernel has about 20%, and then you stack WebKit on top of that. Yeah, that's why I love 5.05, man. 5.05, it's like one and done for most of the time. Memory errors a lot. Well, like I said, that's the WebKit part, and that's just because the WebKit exploit is brute forcing. It's doing some really hacky stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to know what the kernel exploit reliability was. The memory errors I don't really care about because that's WebKit. That's whatever. 5.05 is gold. Yeah. There's. I don't think there is a better firmware when it comes to reliability. I don't know if 1.76 was maybe more stable. I was never on 1.76. That was before my interest in PS4 and before I even had like exploitation knowledge really. But yeah, 5.05 is really great. Also, I changed the DNS and it helps though. I mean, in general, when you're doing jailbreaking, I recommend using the manual trick to run like a fake DNS server and redirect the manual to the exploit page because it's so quick. You just go into settings, you go to the manual, and you run the exploit. Whereas if you go through the browser, you have to maybe type it in if it's not set as like the default page it launches to, and The web browser is also a little bit different and how it works internally than the manual, so there's more going on. That's actually another thing that's interesting. Some people think the web browser, when you launch it from the www app icon in the shell, is the same as the browser you launch from the manual, and that's not the case. Um, the browser launch from the manual is more limited, and there's actually less noise that happens on that launch. So, from my experience, running exploits from the manual is more stable than running them from the www browser because there's less shit going on in the background. So it's there's less interference with anything that exploits might be doing. How many languages do you speak? I speak English. That's it. Um, I can speak bits and pieces of other languages, but in terms of fluency, I don't have it in other languages. I will switch to the manual. Yeah, I mean, the manual is a little bit more annoying to set up because, like I said, you have to set up that fake DNS server. You have to be running a web server, um, or redirect the fake DNS to a public remote host. But like, I find it so much better once you have it set up. Why hasn't anyone pointed this out before? I feel like it's been brought up before. It's just that people probably don't really care enough. The differences are minor. Like, they're not super large in general. But it can make a difference depending on like the scenario. Can you downgrade a PS4 that has a higher exploitable firmware? Uh, the only way you can use like do a downgrade or a replay is if you do that glitch attack, no matter what firmware you're on. It has nothing to do with the software exploit side of things, and it has everything to do with dumping the state and replaying it. It's uh, it's fully a hardware attack. Will you speak French in Canada? No, no. In Canada, we do like officially from a government standpoint have French like bilingual, English and French, but Canadian citizens, well, there is somewhat of an expected level of fluency in French, I guess. Like you are forcefully taught it in school, but you don't have to like yeah, you don't have to be fully fluent in French unless you live in like Quebec or something and you have to speak it to people. French French is a minority that gets special treatment. Yeah, I mean most of Canada doesn't like it's pretty much only Quebec and some of the Maritimes speak French as well. Like if you go to like Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, those areas, because they're I guess close and do business with Quebec, you'll find a lot more bilingual people in those provinces than any other province. Um, but like outside of that area, Quebec, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, you're not really going to find French used very much. It's mostly just in that area. Like Spanish in the US, that's probably a decent comparison. I don't know the split of like Spanish and English in the US. I feel like actually Spanish is probably more common in the US than French is in Canada. I think it's probably like yeah, the split is probably more even in the US than it is in Canada for like the bilingual languages. How about CFW to downgrade PS4? Not possible. You need the state before it gets changed for the hardware glitch attack. Because when you get into like the upgrade or the firmware update process and all that stuff, there's interactions with SAMU that you can't really affect on a CFW because those keys are still not owned by you. You can't see what they are. Um, Operations happen on the security processor that you just don't have a lot of influence from on the x86 chip. You have control over the interface with a kernel exploit. Like you can control what you send and what you receive, or not what you receive, but how you handle what you receive. But anything under the hood that isn't running on the x86 chip that interacts with SAMU, you're screwed on that. Um, People keep quoting this thing from Al Azif, and I'm not sure what it is. Like where they're seeing that. Can you guys point me to like where you're getting that from? Because like I need a bit of context to comment on that. Okay, thank you. Take a quick look at it. Oh, I mean, this is yeah. There's a few strings in the kernel that you can find that are interesting, like debug stuff put in there by Sony. This is one of them. It basically like on certain types of behavior, they'll print something to the log that's like something's messed up here. Please let the kernel team know because there's corruption. So that's not too far out of place. There's a lot of weird strings you can find in the PS4 kernel. There's strings for Windows XP service packs in the PS4 kernel. I mean, there's a lot of wild shit. I think that's because of like the DLL stuff they do for the shell, because they use mono, like C# for the shell, and they use DLLs. It's really weird. But you can find a lot of like interesting stuff in the kernel. Like if you just go through the strings, there's tons of them. Yeah, like it's probably something new they added on 7.50 for like a security thing or a defense in depth. So even games have funny leftover strings. Yeah, it's one of those things you can data mine and find some fun and interesting stuff. Is there a link to the CVE being worked on? Bug command will take you to the bug that is the basis for what we've been doing on the streams. There you go. They learned a few things after PS3. Yeah, so that's one thing about Sony. They do learn. They do learn from past mistakes generally. Like PS4 security was a lot better than PS3. PS5 security is a lot better than PS4. Generally, they move in like a positive direction when it comes to security. So, as much as a meme some of their issues are and some of their code is, generally they're on the upward trend. So yeah, I think I've probably answered enough things from chat. Yeah, next little while we'll be working on the race, making that work. Hopefully on the FreeBSD VM. We'll do an update stream in a few days' time. I don't know exactly when. I'll let you guys know. Once again, follow us on Twitter and check out our Discord for when that happens. And just in general to see when other stuff goes live too. We have our podcasts on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. So if that sounds interesting to any of you, like basically what we do is we cover some topics from like the last week in terms of write-ups, exploits that have come out, some news topics around that, and any like research that looks interesting, like white papers and stuff on archive. So if that sounds interesting to you, you can tune into our podcast as well. All the previous podcasts and eventually the videos from these streams will be up on our YouTube. But yeah, other than that, I think I'll call it here. I'll check in chat for any last minute things. Maybe there is a way to dump the syscon via Orbis as everything is connected. Yeah, I mean, that would require more research. But yeah, so check out those links. And we'll be back to stream again in a few days. And we'll see you then. Oh, actually, I will actually ask Z, do we have any raid targets since you're around? I will ask that because I didn't raid the other day, but where it's a reasonable time of day, we might have some people doing some interesting stuff. Nah? Okay, all good. Alright then. Only a couple people going? Alright, fair enough. Yeah, once again, thanks for the gifted subs, Magic Trick. We really appreciate that as well. But yeah, with that said, we'll see you guys on the next stream, and we'll see you then.